Good evening, and welcome to the stream of ghostly ships.
Ooh,
I am
spooky.
Spooky.
Yes. Welcome. My name is Katrina, and I'm from the UK.
I am Lynx from Norway. Your little duo with you every Sunday, as usual. And
Yes.
apparently we weren't quite finished with Halloween this year.
Apparently not. We seem to be compelled to do some spooky. Although, to be fair, in the space between Christmas and Halloween, the sort of between season, that's quite a good time for horror as well. I mean, people even get the spooky involved at Christmas, do they not?
Yeah, I think it's quite fitting for most of the dark season, personally. I am in Norway. It does get quite dark in winter, so...
Yeah, so you might as well make the most of it with some ghost stories.
Ghost stories and candles and all of that. Something nice and hot to drink. It can get quite cozy. I think my audio is a bit loud. Maybe not.
Is it? I don't know. I'm hearing you fine, but
yeah,
it's got to that sort of stage in the winter where I might be wearing a woolly hat underneath my headphones because it's freaking cold in my house. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm Norwegian, so I wear wool from inner to outer under a woolen blanket. So yeah, and this year the electricity is extremely expensive. So yeah, another reason for hunkering down under the blanket with something hot to drink. Definitely.
Yes, definitely. And we've got some good stories for a winter's night today.
We do. Absolutely.
Most certainly. Yeah. With the ships, I mean, strange things have been happening with ships for years. And they still are. I mean, I don't like ships anyway. Ships are already bad. I get seasick. So, ghosts and ships? Not my idea of a good time. Not in the slightest.
Yeah, I can follow that thought. I'm not really scared of ships, but the thought of being lost in an endless ocean is almost the same as the thought of being lost in space, not being able to get anywhere. And honestly, a Bond movie gave me some nightmarish visions of that. When it starts with the astronaut getting cut off because the spaceship is taken and his cord back to the ship is cut, and I was just like, oh my god. Nightmare of all nightmares for me, at least. So I will probably keep my feet on Earth, thank you very much. At least.
The isolation, not good. I mean, there's things that we don't know about the bottom of the sea that we do know about space. Nobody's really bothered going down there to explore it very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Illuminatis. The movie is Moonraker. And thank you to Ferocious Chihuahua for hosting us. That is very kind of you, and good to see you as always.
Nice.
Please
Thanks,
give
mate.
him a follow. He's also on Odyssey, so if he would kindly put this Odyssey link in the chat, then people can join him. He does some wonderful streams, so...
Nice. Yes, feel free to drop your Odyssey link in the chat. Creepypastas on ships are my favorite. Scary sea monsters and stuff. Yes. And the creepypasta is an older concept than you might think. There's basically been the equivalent of creepypastas going around for centuries. Do you know creepypastas, Lynx?
I do. I have listened to a few of them. Not so many as I would have liked, but there was one period where I ended up listening to quite a few. They're quite interesting.
Yeah, I was big on my creepypastas and SCP files for a while. The SCP files gets pretty nuts. By the way, that's just people submitting monsters and stuff to an imaginary database within a universe where they're trying to contain them.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably an entry for some of the ships on the list tonight, because certainly there's some of them which you could just run with the imagination if you wanted to write a horror story about them. I mean, we were saying, weren't we, about the Mary Celeste? You've got a lot to run with if you wanted to write a story about the Mary Celeste.
Yeah, definitely. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle actually did write a story about that one, which was quite interesting. So the Marie Celeste, the anniversary for her recovery was actually last night, because she was found floating in the sea, and according to the papers, she was going from Boston to Lisbon with the captain, a crew of 7 people, I think, and the captain's daughter. And the ship was abandoned. There was no sound of foul play or rough weather. The boat wasn't injured. But there was no one on board. I think even there were teacups full of tea and nobody there.
Which has really led to every single theory, from crew mutiny to poisonous water, poisonous food, a technical issue that compelled the crew to abandon the ship. But because there are even full mugs of tea and stuff like that, and no sign of panic or taking anything with them, like, people have said that maybe it was alien abduction.
Yeah. There was also a theory at the time that they saw a storm coming when they were in the vicinity of some islands, and they went ashore, and the boat blew away from them, but they weren't seen again. So yeah,
that is, like, really weird.
Yeah.
And there's certainly there's sort of modern examples as well. There's, like, in 1955 there was this boat called the Joyita that went missing. It was found abandoned in the South Pacific 5 weeks after it had been reported overdue at the harbor. And the air search mission couldn't actually trace it until the merchant ship found it drifting like 600 miles off its original source. There was no sign of crew or cargo, and there was just a doctor's bag and several bloody bandages on the deck, and the radio was tuned to the universal distress signal. But nobody actually ever found out what happened there. None of the crew was ever seen again, like not even bodies.
Yeah. There was some issue with my audio. I hope I've been able to fix it now. Please let me know. There was one, the Jian Seng, which is quite interesting, because the Australian Coast Watch found a ship floating in the sea in 2006. It had a broken tow rope, so that could explain why it was empty. But that was all the investigators had. The name Jian Seng was printed on the side, but there was no record of a distress signal, no identifying documents or belongings, and they couldn't find who it belonged to. Nobody missed the ship. So they have no knowledge of the ship at all. So,
yeah. I mean, in my sort of researchings and readings for today, I even came across the story of a haunted U-boat, which quite a few U-boat captains and crew during World War One, with the Central Powers, the German army, they had very strange experiences in the U-boats, although it's debatable as to whether this was actually something going on or whether, people hadn't really been in U-boats before, and so the effect of sort of the lack of light and the isolation and the hanging around with the same people for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and also possibly fuel systems and that, and fumes, could have led to hallucinations. We just don't know with the U-boats. Well, that's the thing about most of these things. You can't. There is just a lack of any actual concrete facts because the sea just sweeps things away.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ships that have been wrecked as well out of deliberate malice by people who were on them. Because, it said that on February 13th, 1748, there was a 3-mast schooner called the Lady Loverbond near Kent. And it left the port for a bit of a sail along the Thames River. And it wanted to go from the Thames River into the sea to Portugal. And the captain had been just married. And he brought his new wife with him on the honeymoon voyage. And there were crew below decks celebrating the new bride and groom, but the boatswain and the first mate, John Rivers, were out on the watch and steering the ship. And apparently this Rivers guy, although he'd been his captain's best man at the wedding, he was in love with the bride as well. And so he thinks of her and becomes jealous, and then, he's so angry and so jealous that he deliberately wrecks the ship. He just drives it onto what's called the Goodwin Sands in the English Channel, and it's one of the most dangerous passages.
Well,
yeah.
Perhaps if you're so jealous, you might want to go to a different ship, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it just seems to be a case of if I can't have her, nobody can.
Yeah, probably. Jealousy has a lot to answer for over the centuries, you might say, and millennia.
Oh, for sure. We're gonna have to take a look at it in the Dante's Inferno streams.
Yeah, it probably
In
will
not
come
too long.
up. Yeah. Carlotta has a question. She wonders how much research we do for each stream.
It
It
can
does.
honestly vary a little bit, like depending on how much time there's been in the week. But sometimes I get quite a lot into research and I end up doing like a load of it. And other streams are more relaxed and cozy.
Yeah, it depends on time and the theme. Some themes I know more about from before, so I don't have to research that much.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be a bit difficult to find information at times, or at least information that I
Yeah.
find relevant. So
Especially like if you haven't got subscriptions to a bunch of journals and archives and stuff, sometimes that's what I find difficult with research. But I think we'll probably be able to amass more of those sort of resources as we go on with the project. But yeah, quite often I spend quite a while researching for streams because I just get interested and I fall down a total link rabbit hole.
yeah,
So yeah.
sometimes I manage to lose my way in a bit too many woke links on a topic, which really puts me off. So I don't really want to do more research after that because I get a bit scared of clicking a link. So yeah, it can be a bit dangerous.
Beholder Chair asked if it was Lady Loggerbond. No, it's called Lady Lovibond. I don't really know how you pronounce it, like Lovibond or something.
Loggerbond, I would say.
Love with the V, and I just don't really know what was about. But yeah, that one got wrecked on the 13th of February, wrecked deliberately by this guy, apparently. And that's because he sort of drove it into a sort of quicksand. That's why he drove it. And so it got wrecked.
Yeah.
On those sands.
Yeah, I do wonder if the mystery of the Vikings in Greenland or Newfoundland who disappeared. I do wonder if that is a story of lost ships. Because it is feasible that they actually just picked up and left and got lost at sea. So I don't know, maybe a dragon ship might suddenly appear somewhere. Though perhaps a bit rotten by now.
Yeah. It might be.
Yeah.
Or would be. Well, sometimes this stuff from the Viking Ages gets preserved really well because it lands in some sort of like peaty soil or has the right moisture conditions to just preserve it.
Yeah,
so you can sometimes get lucky.
Yeah, they found one a couple of years back, actually. Down in southeastern Norway, close by the border to Sweden. So I'm not sure how preserved it was. I know they were digging around for it this summer, but I haven't really seen anything since. But then again, I haven't really looked for anything coming out from it, but definitely interesting.
That's true. I mean, I wonder if like there's ever been any weird happenings around findings of the ships. Probably has been like an archaeological excavation of like a ship that's been cursed or something. There was definitely a lot of cursing of archaeologists going on when they investigated the pyramids.
Yeah,
It is not a risk-free occupation.
No, that's true. But I haven't
Booby
heard
traps, curses, rolling boulders.
I haven't heard anything of that when it comes to Viking ships. They were buried in revered burials, so perhaps not what would be cursed. I don't know. I haven't heard any stories of that, so.
Yeah. Well, if I ever come across any, the U-boat was particularly weird. I have to say that I came across, because that seemed like to be cursed right from the very beginning of its construction. It kept having accidents.
Yeah. There are a few of those. Are we ready for our first story?
Yes. We are having one that I found to sort of tangentially link this stream to the season. And because I found it quite interesting. It is the tragedy of the Christmas tree ship.
Okay, let's take a listen.
The tragedy of the Christmas tree ship. No one on that side of the lake could understand why on earth someone would choose to go boating or scuba diving on a day like this. Being a drizzly, overcast day in late October of 1971, it was hardly the weather for any sort of recreational water sports, and they supposed there wasn't likely to be much to see on the bottom of Lake Michigan's west side that day, other than mud, and the sailing aspect certainly didn't afford the best views in those conditions either. However, unbeknownst to them, Gordon Kent Bellrichard was intent upon a purpose. With sonar and a dive light, he had set out that day to find the wreck of the Vernon, a 177-foot, 700-ton steamer that had sunk in a storm in 1887, leaving only one passenger surviving to tell the tale. He was indeed very hopeful of finding his prize, as local fishermen had told him of a location in which their nets always snagged on something large. As he sailed up and down, scanning methodically with his sonar, the boredom began to set in, when suddenly, around the place where the sailors had said, it gave an alert. He had found something. Excited, he prepared his gear and descended as quickly as he could. It appeared to be a well-preserved shipwreck, standing upright in 172 feet of water. It must be the Vernon. It must be. And then, just as Gordon was about to catch sight of his long-awaited prize, its grand silhouette gradually coming into focus, bits of rigging visible, his dive light went out. He floated for a minute or so in the darkness, annoyed. But once his eyes adjusted to the misty, murky depths of the lake, he could see well enough to get by. Perhaps a tad foolishly, he went forward without the light and began to feel around. Knowledgeable of ships as he was, Gordon quickly realized that this was not the Vernon. This was a smaller ship. It must be at least 205 tons, he thought, and hugging his way along the hull and scrabbling about around the deck, he could make out that it had 3 masts. He soon realized with incredulity what he must have found. This was far better than the Vernon, only he hadn't ever thought he would find it instead. He came back up, lay back in his boat, and whooped with delight, for he had found what was to immortalize his name. It was the wreck of the elusive Rouse Simmons. Captain Herman Scheunemann was well loved in and around Chicago. For who could fail to love the man who brings one of the principal joys of the Yuletide season, the Christmas tree? Every winter, before Christmas, he would undertake to bring felled pine trees to the waterfronts of Chicago and sell them there from his ship, the Rouse Simmons. She was by no means his first ship. He had sailed many schooners before. Also, to call her entirely his would be lying, for in truth, like most captains, he could not afford a schooner outright, and instead he held shares in the vessel. He had 1/8 share, his friend Captain Charles Nelson had another, and a rich businessman called Manners J. Bonner owned the remaining 3/4. Scheunemann was a kind and generous man who always donated a portion of his wares to the less fortunate, decorating orphanages and hospitals out of his own pocket. His wife, Barbara, and their daughters, Elsie, and the twins, Hazel and Pearl, helped to make other articles such as wreaths. They had never been rich, but they were well liked, with the local newspapers even dubbing Scheunemann Captain Santa. Sailing Lake Michigan was a difficult trade, which some might regard as having too much risk for too little reward. In 1898, a month after the birth of his twins, Herman's brother, August, had sadly passed away in a shipping accident, sailing a load of Christmas trees to Chicago on the schooner Estal. His brother's vessel had been broken up in a violent storm off the coast of Glen Coe, Illinois, with no survivors. Although Lake Michigan is a lake, it is incredibly large and prone to bad weather. It might as well be the ocean as far as a small ship in distress is concerned. Indeed, Herman had tried to make his living in other ways, but his attempt to run a saloon had failed, and he had had to file for bankruptcy. By 1912, Herman had fully taken up the mantle of his older brother, a veteran schooner master of 30 years. He considered himself in his prime, but the ship he commanded was not. The once gallant vessel was now 44 years old, battered by the elements and worn by time and heavy loads of lumber. One late November day, the 22nd of 1912 to be precise, it was time to make the late-season Christmas tree delivery before the weather got so bad that they couldn't attempt it. The Rouse Simmons had been piled high, with pine trees covering every inch of the deck, so that all the folk on the pier of Thompson, Michigan, called it a floating forest. One might say that there were rather too many to fit properly on the boat. Dark clouds gathered, but the weather didn't look too bad. So Captain Herman Scheunemann and Captain Charles Nelson set off to deliver the Christmas trees to Chicago with a crew of reliable sailors. Some say that as she set off, they saw streams of rats leaving the ship, as if prophesying its doom. Later that day, the hints of bad weather had developed into a tremendous storm, one of the biggest Lake Michigan had ever seen. Reports were coming in of vessels in distress, so many that the life-saving stations could barely keep up. The family were all worried for the Christmas tree ship. At 2:50 p.m. on November 23rd, a Coast Guard at Kewaunee Life-Saving Station, Wisconsin, ran to the station keeper, Captain Nelson Crate. A vessel had been spotted flying its flag at half-mast. It was headed south. He held up the binoculars and made a note of the particulars. Between 5 and 6 miles east-southeast, gale flowing from northwest. Captain Crate urgently requested the gas tugboat, but he found that it had already gone out on another job. After a few minutes they could not see the stricken vessel at all, so at 3:10 p.m. he phoned Two Rivers, the next station along to the south, who immediately launched their boat. However, when the lifeboat crew reached the place where the schooner should have been, they saw nothing. Nothing but water, mist, and the falling snow. Barbara and her daughters were very worried that they had heard no word of the vessel's arrival in Chicago. They still dared to hope that the vessel had merely pulled into a safe harbor to wait out the storm. The families of the crew lamented as bedraggled, needleless Christmas trees washed up on the shores in the following days. The Scheunemann family's worst fears were confirmed. The ship, source of much joy to Chicago, had been lost in the storm. What exactly happened on the Rouse Simmons that night, we shall never know. One can only imagine how the men must have struggled to right the vessel, overladen as it was. Upon proper investigation by an underwater archaeological team in 2006, the masts, anchor, chain, and spar were all found to be lying beyond the bow, leading to the assumption that the schooner had nosedived due to uneven weight distribution. The only comfort for the family was the washing up of Hermann Scheunemann's oilskin-wrapped wallet in 1924. At least they had something to remember him by. Barbara and her daughters continued the business, eventually switching from schooners to taking the trees to Chicago by train, and sold them from the deck of a docked schooner for the sake of tradition. By 1920, the schooner trade on Lake Michigan was at an end. Once proud schooners lay leaking and decaying, moored in their berths around the lake. The loss of the Rouse Simmons had really sounded the death knell for Christmas tree deliveries. However, our story does not quite end there. For even now, Lake Michigan mariners claim to spot the Rouse Simmons, laden with her cargo, appearing from nowhere, and around Barbara Scheunemann's grave in Acacia Park Cemetery, it is said that one can constantly smell evergreens.
So, Christmas trees. Definitely a very sad story. And thank you for hosting, Modernity. It's good to see you.
Thank you
And-
indeed.
And of course, welcome to Jack White. Good to have you with us.
And thank you to Ferocious Chihuahua for the ice creams. That was very kind of you.
Yeah, and Jack White as well. A couple of ice creams. Thank you very much.
Yes, that one was certainly a very sad one. And actually, many of the trees are still in the ship's hold there, although 2 have been extracted and shown as exhibits. Several items recovered from that ship are now housed in Rogers Street Fishing Village Museum in Two Rivers, including the ship's wheel. And the ship's anchor has been retrieved and now stands at the entrance to the Milwaukee Yacht Club. And the remains of the wreck are listed on the National Register of Historic Places for the US. So a forensic study of that suggested that the ship had steerage. It was fine, and it was sailing for shelter when it sank. The mizzenmast had snapped off the above deck, and the upper portion of that mast was not located. And then the main mast was found forward and to the port, so that's usually the left side of the wreck, with the base missing. And then the foremast is intact. And it lay nearly parallel, but on top of the main mast. So one of the masts, at least one, fell out of the mast step, so the bit that holds the mast as the ship sank. But yeah, they don't know exactly what happened, because the ship was capable of being steered. But it seems most likely that the mast fell over at some point.
Yeah,
one of them.
well, without the mast, it's a bit hard to sail a ship. So,
Mm,
and
yes.
with the forces in play when the mast breaks, they are quite huge. So, it might not be, or as you say, all evidence say it's not due to steering, but it basically just wasn't able to float anymore.
Mm. I mean, it's really captured the imagination, this story. There's been at least 4 histories, 2 documentaries, several plays, also musicals, which seems a little bit insensitive. It seems a bit like doing like Titanic, the musical.
Yeah.
Like, maybe not. Maybe not. That was like a huge tragedy. We could not, you know? And also folk songs as well. And so they've all been written. And but it's not all sad, you know, because they do have a commemoration of it every year in early December, and they do deliver symbolic Christmas trees to Chicago's disadvantaged communities. So they give them Christmas trees. So that's quite a nice thing to do in memory.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like something that's went down in history for them. So, yeah.
Mm. For sure. I mean, it's sort of like when you're doing the research, like obviously his brothers already died at that, and many ships went down the same way. I mean, there was 3 other ships that went down that night, and his wife Barbara was sort of almost expecting something to happen to him as a schooner captain, because it was a very, very dangerous living.
Yeah.
And then when the railways came along, people dropped it pretty quick.
Yeah. There's quite a few stories of either relatives or the fishermen or seamen themselves having a bad feeling before a trip and going anyway and not coming back. So yeah, being at sea, or in this case a lake, is quite dangerous. So
Yeah. And I just want to make a note about Lake Michigan, because maybe, it's hard for people from smaller European countries to really understand how you can be so utterly lost in a lake. Yeah, we're talking about Lake Michigan. America is large. It is big, really big. So this is one of the Great Lakes, and it's the second largest of the Great Lakes. That means it's estimated at about 58,030 kilometers squared, and has about 4,900 kilometers cubed of water in it. Well, in depth. So that's its volume, and so it's a huge, huge lake. So it sort of has its own weather patterns and stuff like that.
yeah, there are quite a few very large lakes in Europe as well. So those who live near those might be able to understand.
Yeah.
But you don't
I don't know what the
even.
largest lakes in Europe are. Bodensee is pretty big. I think we call that something different in English, don't you? Lake Constance? What you
I'm
call
not
it?
sure. I'm not sure. I do think the largest lakes are in Russia, but it's Russia. Yeah. It's enormous. So, but there have been plenty of things happening in small lakes as well. So, and when you get to the size of Lake Michigan, it's basically like being out on sea. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
I'll
that's
just
the
say-
best comparison, just in general. Just think of it as being at sea.
It's basically a small sea in the middle of America. Yeah. Ragnar, I would like to thank Ragnar for the diamond. Evening, ladies. Remember Scott's armor at 8:30. Yes, he will be on if you want to go check him out. Thank you very much for the diamond, Ragnar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think I was just saying that for particularly fellow UK people. It's hard to understand how big it is.
well, the UK is small, so maybe they have a general lack of ability when it comes to size.
Someone says you could fit all of fish and chips in Lake Michigan, maybe Wales too. I presume fish and chips refers to England.
Yeah, maybe so.
Wales is not bad for fish and chips either, to be honest. Yeah.
I have actually been to a place for fish and chips, though I did get a pizza instead.
You went to a place where there was fish and chips and you got pizza, but wasn't the
Yeah.
whole point of the place fish and chips?
Yeah.
But yeah, you
So-
don't like fish, do you?
No, I don't, so I got a
You're
pizza
really
instead.
not cut out for the. You're really not cut out for the nautical coastal sort of life. Don't like fish.
I've lived along the coast my entire life.
Yes, but
So,
you're somehow opposed to the main source of food that there is on the coast.
well, it's not my fault fish tastes like fish. So,
It's fish's fault that fish tastes like fish.
yeah, bad
Shouldn't
fish.
be so not tasty.
Yeah, naughty fish.
Loch Ness never freezes. Does it never freeze? I'd never heard that fact about Loch Ness before.
I don't know. I've heard a lot about Loch Ness, but not that.
Apparently, the largest in the UK, by comparison to Lake Michigan, is Loch Ness, which is 392 kilometers squared.
Yeah, the largest three are in Russia, with Lake Ladoga on top, 17,700 square kilometers. That's
Russia is huge.
Yeah, the second is Lake Onega, which is 9,894 kilometers square. Also huge.
Huge lakes in Russia.
Absolutely. But I do have a little story on being lost at sea, or perhaps seemingly so. Filipino fishermen came across a yacht in 2016, and it seemed to be abandoned. So they went aboard to check what was going on. And of course, they thought it was abandoned, so they thought it would be no humans there. Which you could say that it wasn't, but it did contain a mummy. Which was, yeah, it was lying across the desk in the main cabin, seeming to be stretching for the mobile phone. And it turned out to be the German sailor Manfred Fritz Bajorat. I probably butchered that name, but I'm sorry. He had been sailing around the world for 20 years. The last reported sighting had been in 2009, so 7 years earlier. The once friend said he had heard from Bajorat on Facebook in 2015. So they expected him to be have been dead for at least a year. But then he was autopsied, and it turned out he had been dead for about a week. And in 1 week, become completely mummified.
How did they know he was dead for a week? I wonder how they'd tell if he was completely mummified.
Well, the stomach contents and such, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe other physical evidence, but how on earth does a body become completely mummified in 1 week?
I have no idea. That's like some Indiana Jones level type stuff.
Yeah, it does sound like some vortex.
Like he got shriveled and...
it does take my mind to, the Bermuda Triangle thing, that he disappeared with his entire boat in some vortex. And, well, in there, several years passed, and then he came back. But here on Earth, it was just a week later or something, some sort of portal. But there might be a natural explanation that I don't know about. So yeah, but
yeah,
they did say the warm salt air would have mummified him, but that was when they thought he had been dead for at least a year. It wouldn't supposed to, or at least where I read the story, it didn't seem like it was really possible for that to happen in a year. So, yeah.
No, it's very freaky, that.
Oh yeah.
Very freaky. I mean, there was the other ship where everyone was frozen.
Oh yeah.
Now that was a weird story. Again, another one where they say it's bad luck to have a woman on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
And then they decided to take a rather stupid shortcut, didn't they?
Yeah, you could say that.
Or try to do something daring at an inappropriate time with inadequate preparation.
Yeah, that as well. But it's not really a new thing now, is it?
No. I mean, if I remember rightly, it was which passage of the Arctic they were trying to sail through?
I don't remember, but it was up in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name.
It was the Octavius, actually. I remember that it was called the Octavius. And basically, this ship, they were on their way back from, I think, around the Cape. Let me look this up. Because, yeah, they were found west of Greenland.
Yeah.
They were found west of Greenland. And it was almost perfectly preserved. The entire crew of 28 frozen. Completely. So it left England for the Orient in 1761 and arrived at its destination the following year. And then the captain had gambled on a return through the treacherous and then little known Northwest Passage. And the unfortunate result was that they trapped their vessel in sea ice north of Alaska. Thus, the Octavius have made Northwest Passage posthumously. So yeah, they're stuck there, they freeze, the sea ice melts, and they drift out. And then the ship's last recorded position, while the crew was actually still alive, was 75 degrees north, 160 degrees west, about 402 kilometers north of Utqiagvik, Alaska. So yeah, it was really creepy because when they were found, obviously, whole crew full of frozen people.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I would prefer that over a mummy or two. I would prefer neither, to be honest. But it is,
Yeah, both
you
of them
know,
are creepy.
yeah, it is one of the dangers of sailing in the icy parts of the sea.
Freezing to death, yes.
Yeah, getting trapped in the ice, so you literally can't get away, unless you take your chances with the lifeboat, but you might want the ship instead. What many times happen when a ship gets stuck in the ice is that it's evacuated in case it gets destroyed, crushed by the ice, and they set up camp in the vicinity and keep an eye on it. And if it gets loose from the ice, they rush back and try to sail out. It's not always successful, though in our days you can get rescued off the ice, which you couldn't back in the day. The Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen, the first man to reach the South Pole, he designed his ship specifically for that not to happen. He designed it so that if it got between two pieces of ice, it would slip out like a bar of soap. And he did fairly well with that. His ship did not get stuck. It did get back to Norway. It was called Fram, which means ahead in Norwegian.
Nice.
So yeah.
Clever ship design.
Yeah, absolutely. He did disappear.
Pressing problem.
Yeah, he did disappear at sea, though. We don't know what happened to him, but not with the ship, with an airplane.
I mean, it seems like if you hang around enough on the sea, like it's almost a 50-50 chance on you disappearing.
Yeah. He joined in a rescue mission for a ship. I don't remember if they were going to Svalbard or if it was one of the other islands up in the Arctic Sea. But he joined on a ship, no, on a plane, and the plane was lost, and it was never found. Nor not the wreck, not the people, nothing. As far as I remember, so yeah. But he was a true daredevil, so he might be happy to go that way instead of lingering in a failing body at home, I would suppose.
It is true. We have got some more people in the chat. We got Yankee Apple and Dancing Penguin. Hello to you.
Welcome, guys.
We got a new follower. JMFS just followed. And we got Dogface in the YouTube chat talking about sausage and chips.
Yeah.
You can
This-
get everything and chips in the UK, basically. You can
Yeah.
even. It is a practice in certain parts of northern England to have things with half rice, half chips. This is apparently a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Can't decide which one to have. Have both. Double carbs. Double down on them.
Yeah.
Oh dear. But yes, fish and chips in English coastal towns. Good stuff. If you're not like lynx and you like fish.
In my defense, I do try fish regularly to see if the fish has changed its taste, but it doesn't comply.
Mm.
How rude.
Yep. It does not comply. I mean, there's all sorts of different types of fish, and I know plenty of people who don't like strong fish. I'm pretty good with all fish, to be honest. I like fish.
I'm good
But
with fish as long as I don't taste it.
well. There are a lot of different types of fish. Maybe you shall find a fish that you like out there, which is
Maybe.
extremely bland.
Yeah, which does not taste like fish. Though, as we have mentioned a daredevil, perhaps it's time for the story of another daredevil.
Mm. Yes.
Because
Yes,
I
we can
think,
have that.
yeah, I think we all have heard of the Flying Dutchman, but we might not know much of the specifics of that tale. We did start the stream with the overture from Wagner's The Flying Dutchman, which is a 2-hour concert. So I found a poem based on the story, so let's take a listen. The Flying Dutchman. Long time ago, from Amsterdam a vessel sailed away, as fair a ship as ever flung aside the laughing spray. Upon the shore were tearful eyes, and scarves were in the air. As to her, over the sootier sea, went fond adieu and prayer. And brave hearts, yearning shoreward from the outward going ship, felt lingering kisses, clinging still to tear wet cheek and lip. She steered for some far eastern clime, and as she skimmed the seas, each taper mast was bending like a rod before the breeze. Her captain was a stalwart man, an iron heart had he. From childhood's days he sailed upon the rolling sootier sea. He feared nothing upon the earth, and scarcely heaven feared. He would have dared and done whatever mortal man had dared. He looked aloft, where high in the air the pennant caught the blue, and every rope and spar and sail was firm and strong and true. He turned him from the swelling sail to gaze upon the shore. Ah, little thought the skipper then to would meet his eye no more. He dreamt not that an awful doom was hanging over his ship, that Vanderdecken's name would yet make pale the speaker's lip. The vessel bounded on her way, and spire and dome went down. Ere darkness fell, beneath the wave had sunk the distant town. No more, no more, ye hapless crew, shall Holland meet your eye. In lingering hope and keen suspense, maid, wife, and child shall die. Away, away the vessel speeds, till sea and sky alone are around her, as her course she steers across the torrid zone. Away until the North Star fades, the Southern Cross is high, and myriad gems of brightest beam are sparkling in the sky. The tropic winds are left behind. She nears the Cape of Storms, where awful tempest ever sits enthroned in wild alarms, where ocean in his anger shakes aloft his foamy crest, disdainful of the weakly toys that ride upon his breast. Fierce swell the winds and waters round the Dutchman's gallant ship, but to their rage defiance rings from Vanderdecken's lip. Impotent they to make him swerve, their might he dares despise, as straight he holds his onward course, and wind and wave defies. For days and nights he struggles in the weird unearthly fight. His brow is bent, his eye is fierce, but looks of deep affright. Amongst the mariners go round, as hopelessly they stare. They do not dare to murmur, but they whisper what they fear. Their black-browed captain awes them, 'neath his darkened eye they quail, and the grim and sullen mood their bitter fate bewail, as some fierce rider, ruthless, spurs a timid, wavering horse. He drives his shapely vessel, and they watch the reckless course, till once again their shipwreck's laugh is flung upon the blast. The placid ocean smiles beyond, the dreaded cape is past. Away across the Indian main the vessel northward glides, 1,000 murmuring ripples break along her graceful sides. The perfumed breezes fill her sails, her destined port she nears. The captain's brow has lost his frown, the mariners their fears. Land ho! At length the welcome sound the watchful sailor sings, and soon within an Indian bay the ship at anchor swings. Not idle then the busy crew, ere long the spacious hold is emptied of its western freight and stored with silk and gold. Again the ponderous anchors weighed, the shore is left behind, the snowy sails are bosomed out before the favouring wind. Across the warm blue Indian Sea the vessel southward flies, and once again the North Star fades and austral beacons rise. For home she steers, she seems to know an answer to the word, and swifter skims the burnished deep like some fair ocean bird. For home, the merry crew with gladsome voices cry, and dark-browed Vanderdecken has a mild light in his eye. But once again the cape draws near, and furious billows rise, and still the daring Dutchman's laugh the hurricane defies. But wildly shrieked the tempest, ere the scornful sound had died, a warning to the daring man to curb his impious pride. A crested mountain struck the ship, and like a frightened bird she trembled 'neath the awful shock. Then Vanderdecken heard a pleading voice within the gale. His better angel spoke, but fled before his scowling look, as mast-high mountains broke around the trembling vessel, till the crew with terror paled. But Vanderdecken never flinched, nor 'neath the thunder's quail. With folded arms and stern-pressed lips, dark anger in his eye, he answered back the threatening frown that lowered over the sky. With fierce defiance in his heart and scornful look of flame, he spoke, and thus with impious voice blasphemed God's holy name. Howl on, ye winds, ye tempests, howl, your rage is spent in vain. Despite your strength, your frowns, your hate, I'll ride upon the main. Defiance to your idle shrieks, I'll sail upon my path. I cringe not for thy Maker's smile, I care not for his wrath. He ceased, an awful silence fell. The tempest and the sea were hushed in sudden stillness by the ruler's dread decree. The ship was riding motionless within the gathering gloom. The Dutchman stood upon the poop and heard his dreadful doom. The hapless crew were on the deck in swooning terror prone. They too were bound in fearful fate. In angered thundertone, the judgment words swept over the sea. Go, wretch, accursed, condemned, go sail ever on the deep, by shrieking tempests hemmed. No home, no port, no calm, no rest, no gentle favouring breeze. shall ever greet thee, go accursed and battle with the seas. Go, braggart, struggle with the storm, nor ever cease to live, but bear a million times the pangs that death and fear can give. Away and hide thy guilty head, a curse to all thy kind. Whoever see thee struggling, wretch with ocean and with wind. Away, presumptuous worm of earth, go teach thy fellow worms the awful fate that waits on him who braves the king of storms. 'Twas over, a lurid lightning flash lit up the sea and sky. Around and over the fated ship, then rose a wailing cry from every heart within her of keen anguish and despair. But mercy was for them no more, it died away in air. Once more the lurid light gleamed out, the ship was still at rest, the crew were standing at their posts. With arms across his breast, still stood the captain on the poop, but bent and crouching now, he bowed beneath that fiat dread, and over his swarthy brow swept lines of anguish, as if he 1,000 years of pain had lived and suffered. Then across the heaving, angry main, the tempest shrieked triumphant, and the angry waters hissed their vengeful hate against the toy they oftentimes had kissed. And ever through the midnight storm that hapless crew must speed, they try to round the stormy cape, but never can succeed. And oft when gales are wildest, and the lightning's vivid sheen flashes back the ocean's anger, still the phantom ship is seen, ever sailing to the southward in a fierce tornado's swoop, with her ghostly crew and canvas, and her captain on the poop. Unrelenting, unforgiven, and 'tis said that every word of his blasphemous defiance still upon the gale is heard. But heaven help the ship near which the dismal sailor steers. The doom of those is sealed to whom that phantom ship appears. They'll never reach their destined port, they'll see their homes no more. They who see the Flying Dutchman never, never reach the shore. So, that is most of the story of the Flying Dutchman. It's quite an interesting one.
Tis indeed.
Yeah, let me get the tab open.
Interestingly,
yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Interestingly, it might be the only Wagner opera that I've not watched yet. Ironically.
Yeah.
I need to get on that. It's a short one as well. I've tackled all the 4-hour ones.
Yeah, this one is
entire
only
ring
2
cycle.
hours. Yeah. The ring cycle is on my list. So
It's pretty epic.
yeah.
Would recommend. I mean, you got to make a day of it, and you got to have snacks.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Maybe I'll spend my Christmas doing that.
Based.
Yeah.
Based indeed. Remember, because it's the ring cycle, you must have ring-shaped snacks, like onion rings.
Yeah. Maybe I will
That's
make
what I did.
some Christmas snacks in shapes of a ring. Would balls
Maybe.
make it? They are spheres, but at least they're
Spheres.
round.
Bold? Ball? You said balls. Sorry, I'm being immature again. But I don't know, the only thing that's kind of spherical-ish in the ring cycle is the nugget of gold that Albrecht originally nicks off the Rhine maidens.
Okay.
It's kind of lumpy because
Yeah.
it's not been formed into anything. And I suppose it depends on how the particular production shows it to be in terms of
Yeah.
shape.
Well, I make my own bounties for Christmas, so, I could make the coconut golden or something. Then it gets slightly gold-ish. We'll see. But for our elusive flying Dutchman, it's not quite known where the story comes from originally. The first print reference we have is from, and I do love these epic titles of your days, because the book is called Travels in Various Parts of Europe, Asia and Africa During a Series of 30 Years and Upward, 1790 by John MacDonald. They did know how to make titles back in the day.
Great title.
Yeah. It's very short, so it seems like the story was already making its rounds, but not being documented anywhere. But I do believe the belief of seeing a ghost ship is a portent of doom. That goes way, way back in time. So it's basically a continuation of that. Then there's a few other references over the year. No, I forgot my place. Or I scrolled away from it. It was actually seen by King George V in 1880. So, yeah, I don't know if that makes it more credible, but he was...
George V did go crazy. He was the one that went crazy, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really keep that track of the English royalty, I will admit. I know of the better known ones, of course. And I did find the War of the Roses quite interesting, but not when the Germans took over.
It isn't surprising that ghost ships are a portent of death, because when you think about it, you got the ship over the river of death to the underworld, the river Styx, and stuff like that. So that's a very, very old notion of ships and them taking souls towards death.
Yeah. And
so that could be where a lot of this comes from.
Yeah, and maybe it's also mostly seen when it's getting a bit stormy or around known shipyards or ship churchyards. So it's not really that much of a mystery. We have two potential captains for this. One was Captain Bernard Focke. He was also a Dutchman, and he was said to be in league with the devil because he was able to sail from the Netherlands to Java in such a short amount of time that people didn't believe he was able to do that without the help of the devil. And in the Blackwood, Edinburgh.
So speedy that he must have evoked the occult.
Yeah, I do doubt that he had a motor available. So yeah. And the story, which is featured in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine for May 1821, puts the scene at Cape of Good Hope on the southern tip of Africa. And this introduces the name Captain Henrik van der Decken, or Van der Decken, as it was spelled in the poem I read. And I think That's the name most usually tied to the story.
By the way, before I forget, because I don't know how long this has been here, Yankee Apple donated $3 on Entropy and said thank you for the stream. Thank you very much, Yankee Apple.
Thank you. That's very generous of you.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose he just found a route that people didn't think of before to be that speedy.
Yeah, perhaps a part of the ocean which had a particularly strong current, for example, which sped the boat along the way much quicker. Or maybe it was known to be a bit more dangerous around such a current, so most wouldn't take it, perhaps. It's not good to say, really. But I did like this poem in that the captain is a true daredevil and literally trying to defy the god of storms. So you could say he was trying to measure his strength against Poseidon, which might not be the best idea. Definitely didn't.
Aod has put forward an interesting theory about what he might have had. This guy. Skidbladnir. Or Skidbladnir.
Skidbladnir?
Yep, I can't actually pronounce it. Skidbladnir. But yeah, like, he might have had the finest of all ships. Owned by the god Freyr.
Yeah, there is a ship called Skidbladnir, which is in use in Norway to this day. It's quite old. It travels on the river Mjøsa, which is in southeastern Norway, just east and north of Oslo, though it runs out in the sea south of Oslo. So, yeah. They might have to fight for the name in that case.
They might.
Yeah.
So Skidbladnir is still around today. Probably, but it's probably not the actual one.
No, it's not a horse. It is a boat. Unless it is a horse that was transformed into a boat, but I haven't heard that story, so.
I think maybe they're getting confused with Sleipnir.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, of course. That might even be my mistake. I'm not 100% this week, so my mind takes a bit of a funny detour every once in a while.
Skidbladnir turns up when Freyr also gets gifted his boar, Gullinbursti. So he gets gifted both of those things by the dwarfs because, you know, Loki has chopped off Sif's hair and Thor's caught him, and then Loki has to go and find someone who can make Sif new hair that's equally as golden and will grow just as any other. And so Loki has to go to the dwarfs, and he basically tells them that there's some sort of inventing contest going on. And he basically gets this hair out of them and gifts for the gods as well to try and save his neck. So that's where Gungnir, Draupnir, Gullinbursti, Mjolnir, and also Skidbladnir all come from. So that's that was the best ship in the world because it was made by dwarfs.
Isn't that always the case? The dwarves seem to make the best stuff.
They do.
Yeah.
They're very good with the technical stuffs.
Yeah.
Dwarves are just like an entire race of engineers.
Yeah. So if you are at sea and you happen to come across a storm, please don't defy it while cursing the gods or the god, because you might have to travel the sea forever, for 1,000 years, never reaching land.
Definitely not good to shout any curses at deities.
No. So it is said that these type of boats might be explained by mirages. Optical illusions, basically, and that they don't really exist. Though I wouldn't put it past them to actually be real, Maybe just for the sake that it's a bit more interesting to live in a world with real ghost ships and not just the abandoned ones.
I feel like when there's been a particularly traumatic event happened in a place, maybe some of the energy from that does hang around in an area.
Yeah, and when it comes to the Cape of Good Hope, that is a very stormy place, and a lot of ships have been lost in it, so I wouldn't be surprised if the energy with so many dead sailors would hang around, so to speak.
Yeah, because the sort of, I do believe in the soul, or in that it is in several parts, and so that perhaps a part of it could be hanging around trying to work out some trauma even after death. It seems plausible to me.
Yeah, for me as well.
Apparently the true heir to the English crown lives in Australia. I didn't know this. You mean in the Stuarts? Possibly that means the Stuarts.
I do think that's the so-called best contender for the throne. If you're supposed to think of a different line having the throne. But then there are royals with all sorts of claims running all over the place. In particular, the royal houses which have been deposed over the years. So
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of the ones on the throne at the moment of Britain are not. They came relatively late.
Yeah.
They were German, so yeah.
Yeah, our royal family is Danish, so I definitely get it. And no, we didn't choose them because we had to have, we had a referendum on it, and the people said no with a slight majority. So the politicians wasn't happy with that, so they held another referendum, and then they barely tipped 50%. So
Yep.
Yeah, they weren't so popular as they wanted them to be. So yeah, no, they're Danes. Sorry.
We've only got one more story tonight, haven't we? It's a slightly longer one.
Yeah, we do. I just want to make one little note on lost ships before we take that. I saw a video or sort of documentary on pirates a few years back. I couldn't find it again, so I don't have specific names involved with this. but it involved pirates, so it was quite interesting. Because one would definitely assume that quite a few pirate ships actually disappeared, and at least one did. And then it turned out that the crew, which also consisted of freed slaves, they had put to shore on an island and settled and started their own little community. And I think it was somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And they're still there today, actually. They're descendants.
Yeah.
So they said, no, can't be bothered being a pirate anymore, so let's just settle here.
Done with pirating, gonna be a farmer now.
Yeah.
Honest life choices.
Yeah, they are quite good. But should we turn over to the haunted ships?
Yes. We should.
Okay. Let's hear about the haunted ships.
The Haunted Ships, Scottish folktale. Though my mind's not hoodwinked with rustic marvels, I do think there are more things in the grove, the air, the flood, yea, and the charnelled earth, than what wise man, who walks so proud as if his form alone filled the wide temple of the universe, will let a frail mind say, I'd write I the creed o' the sagest head alive, that fearful forms, holy or reprobate, do page men's heels, that shapes too horrid for our gaze stand o'er the murderer's dust, and for revenge glare up even till the stars weep fire for very pity. Along the Sea of Solway, romantic on the Scottish side, with its woodland, its bays, its cliffs and headlands, and interesting on the English side, with its many beautiful towns with their shadows on the water, rich pastures, safe harbours, and numerous ships, there still linger many traditional stories of a maritime nature, most of them connected with superstitions singularly wild and unusual. To the curious, these tales afford a rich fund of entertainment, from the many diversities of the same story, some dry and barren, and stripped of all the embellishments of poetry, others dressed out in all the riches of a superstitious belief and haunted imagination. In this they resemble the inland traditions of the peasants. But many of the oral treasures of the Galwegian or the Cumbrian coast have the stamp of the Dane and the Norseman upon them, and claim but a remote or faint affinity with the legitimate legends of Caledonia. Some think like a rude, prosaic outline of several of the most noted of the northern ballads, the adventures and depredations of the old ocean kings, still lends life to the evening tale, and, among others, the story of the haunted ships is popular among the maritime peasantry. One fine harvest evening I went on board to the shallop of Richard Folder of Allen Bay, and committing ourselves to the waters, we allowed a gentle wind from the east to waft us at its pleasure towards the Scottish coast. We passed the sharp promontory of Siddick, and, skirting the land within a stone cast, glided along the shore till we came within sight of the ruined abbey of Sweetheart. The green mountain of Criffel ascended beside us, and the bleat of the flocks from its summit, together with the winding of the evening horn of the reapers, came softened into something like music over land and sea. We pushed our shallop into a deep and wooded bay, and sat silently, looking on the serene beauty of the place. The moon glimmered in her rising through the tall shafts of the pines by Caer Laverock, and the sky, with scarce a cloud, showered down on wood and headland and bay the twinkling beams of 1,000 stars rendering every object visible. The tide, too, was coming with that swift and silent swell, observable when the wind is gentle. The woody curves along the land were filling with the flood, till it touched the green branches of the drooping trees, while in the centre current the roll and plunge of 1,000 pellocks told to the experienced fisherman that salmon were abundant. As we looked, we saw an old man emerging from a path that wound to the shore through a grove of doddered hazel. He carried a halve net on his back, while behind him came a girl bearing a small harpoon, with which the fishers are remarkably dexterous in striking their prey. The senior seated himself on a large grey stone which overlooked the bay, laid aside his bonnet, and submitted his bosom and neck to the refreshing sea breeze, and, taking his harpoon from his attendant, sat with the gravity and composure of a spirit of the flood, with his ministering nymph behind him. We pushed our shallop to the shore, and soon stood at their side. "This is old Mark mcmorren, the mariner, with his granddaughter Barbara," said Richard Folder, in a whisper that had something of fear in it. "He knows every creek, and cavern, and quicksand in Solway. He has seen the spectre hound that haunts the Isle of Man, has heard him bark, and at every bark has seen a ship sink. He has seen, too, the haunted ships in full sail, and if all tales be true, he has sailed in them himself. He's an awful person." Though I perceived in the communication of my friend something of the superstition of the sailor, I could not help thinking that common rumour had made a happy choice in singling out old Mark to maintain her intercourse with the invisible world. His hair, which seemed to have refused all intercourse with the comb, hung matted upon his shoulders. A kind of mantle, or rather blanket, pinned with a wooden skewer round his neck, fell mid-leg down, concealing all his nether garments, as far as a pair of hose, darned with yarn of all conceivable colours, and a pair of shoes, patched and repaired till nothing of the original structure remained, and clasped on his feet with 2 massy silver buckles. If the dress of the old man was rude and sordid, that of his granddaughter was gay and even rich. She wore a bodice of fine wool, wrought round the bosom with alternate leaf and lily, and a kirtle of the same fabric, which, almost touching her white and delicate ankle, showed her snowy feet, so very light and round that they scarcely seemed to touch the grass where she stood. Her hair, a natural ornament which woman seeks much to improve, was of bright glossy brown, and encumbered rather than adorned with a snood, set thick with marine productions, along which the small clear pearl found in the Solway was conspicuous. Nature had not trusted to a handsome shape and sylph-like air for young Barbara's influence over the heart of man, but had bestowed a pair of large, bright blue eyes, swimming in liquid light, so full of love and gentleness and joy that all the sailors from Allan Water to fair St. Bees acknowledged their power, and sang songs about the bonny lass of Mark mcmorren. She stood holding a small gaff-hook of polished steel in her hand, and seemed not dissatisfied with the glances I bestowed on her from time to time, and which I held more than requited by a single glance of those eyes, which retained so many capricious hearts in subjection. The tide, though rapidly augmenting, had not yet filled the bay at our feet. The moon now streamed fairly over the tops of Caerlaverock pines, and showed the expanse of ocean, dimpling and swelling, on which sloops and shallops came dancing, and displaying at every turn their extent of white sail against the beam of the moon. I looked on old Mark the mariner, who, seated motionless on his grey stone, kept his eye fixed on the increasing waters with a look of seriousness and sorrow, in which I saw little of the calculating spirit of a mere fisherman. Though he looked on the coming tide, his eyes seemed to dwell particularly on the black and decayed hulls of 2 vessels, which, half immersed in the quicksand, still addressed to every heart a tale of shipwreck and desolation. The tide wheeled and foamed around them, and, creeping inch by inch up the side, at last fairly threw its waters over the top, and a long and hollow eddy showed the resistance which the liquid element received. The moment they were fairly buried in the water, the old man clasped his hands together and said, "Blessed be the tide that will break over and bury ye forever. Sad to mariners and sorrowful to maids and mothers has the time been you have choked up this deep and bonny bay. For evil you were sent, and for evil you have continued. Every season finds from you its song of sorrow and wail, its funeral processions and its shrouded courses. Woe to the land where the wood grew that made ye! Cursed be the axe that hewed ye on the mountains, the hands that joined ye together, the bay that ye first swam in, and the wind that wafted ye here. 7 times have ye put my life in peril, 3 fair sons have ye swept from my side, and 2 bonny grandbairns. And now, even now, your waters foam and flash for my destruction. Did I venture my infirm limbs in quest of food in your deadly bay? I see by that ripple and that foam, and hear by the sound and singing of your surge that ye yearn for another victim, but it shall not be me or mine." Even as the old mariner addressed himself to the wrecked ships, a young man appeared at the southern extremity of the bay, holding his half-net in his hand, and hastening into the current. Mark rose and shouted, and waved him back from a place which to a person unacquainted with the dangers of the bay, real and superstitious, seemed sufficiently perilous. His granddaughter, too, added her voice to his, and waved her white hands, but the more they strove, the faster advanced the peasant, till he stood to his middle in the water, while the tide increased every moment in depth and strength. "Andrew! Andrew!" cried the young woman, in a voice quavering with emotion. "Turn! Turn, I tell you! Oh, the ships! The haunted ships!" But the appearance of a fine run of fish had more influence with the peasant than the voice of bonny Barbara, and forward he dashed, net in hand. In a moment he was borne off his feet, and mingled like foam with the water, and hurried towards the fatal eddies which whirled and roared around the sunken ships. But he was a powerful young man, and an expert swimmer. He seized on one of the projecting ribs of the nearest hulk, and, clinging to it with the grasp of despair, uttered yell after yell, sustaining himself against the prodigious rush of the current. From a shieling of turf and straw, within the pitch of a bar, from the spot where we stood, came out an old woman, bent with age and leaning on a crutch. "I heard the voice of that lad, Andrew Lammy. Canna chiel be drowning that he scales sae uncannily," said the woman, seating herself on the ground and looking earnestly at the water. "Och, aye," she continued. "He's doomed, he's doomed. Heart and hand can never save him. Boats, ropes, and man's strength and wit, all vain, all vain. He's doomed." By this time I had thrown myself into the shallop, followed reluctantly by Richard Folder, over whose courage and kindness of heart superstition had great power, and with one push from the shore and some exertion in sculling, we came within a quoit cast of the unfortunate fisherman. He stayed not to profit by our aid, for when he perceived us, he uttered a piercing shriek of joy, and bounded towards us through the agitated element, the full length of an oar. I saw him for a second on the surface of the water, but the eddying current sucked him down, and all I ever beheld of him again was his hand above the flood, and clutching in agony at some imaginary aid, I sat gazing in horror on the vacant sea before us. But a breathing time before, a human being, full of youth and strength and hope, was there. His cries were still ringing in my ears and echoing in the woods, and now nothing was seen or heard save the turbulent expanse of water and the sound of its chafing on the shores. We pushed back our shallop, and resumed our station on the cliff beside the old mariner and his descendant. Wherefore sought ye to peril your own lives fruitlessly, said Mark, in attempting to save the doomed? Whoso touches those infernal ships never survives to tell the tale. Woe to the man who is found nigh them at midnight, when the tide has subsided, and they arise in their former beauty, with forecastle and deck, and sail and pennon and shroud. Then is seen the streaming of lights along the water from their cabin windows, and then is heard the sound of mirth, and the clamour of tongues, and the infernal whoop and halloo of song, ringing far and wide. Woe to the man who comes nigh to them. I felt something touched with superstition, to which I partly believed I had seen one victim offered up, and inquired of the old mariner how and when came these haunted ships there. Of the time and cause of their destruction, continued the old man, I know nothing certain. They have stood, as you have seen them, for uncounted time, while all other ships wrecked on this unhappy coast have gone to pieces and rotted and sunk away in a few years. These two haunted hulks have neither sunk in the quicksand, nor a single spar on board has been displaced. Maritime legend says that 2 ships of Denmark, having had permission for a time to work deeds of darkness and dolour on the deep, were at last condemned to the whirlpool and the sunken rock, and were wrecked in this bonny bay, as a sign to seamen to be gentle and devout. The night when they were lost was a harvest evening of uncommon mildness and beauty. The sun had newly set, the moon came brighter and brighter out, and the reapers, laying their sickles at the root of the standing corn, stood on rock and bank, looking at the increasing magnitude of the waters, for sea and land were visible from St. Bees to Barnbury. The sails of the 2 vessels were soon seen bent for the Scottish coast, and with a speed outrunning the swiftest ship, they approached the dangerous quicksands at headland of Bourne Point. On the deck of the foremost ship not a living soul was seen, or shape, unless something in darkness and form, resembling a human shadow, could be called a shape, which flitted from extremity to extremity of the ship, with the appearance of trimming the sails and directing the vessel's course. But the decks of its companion were crowded with human shapes. The captain and mate, the sailor and cabin boy all seemed there, and from them the sound of mirth and minstrelsy echoed over land and water. The coast which they skirted along was one of extreme danger, and the reapers shouted to warn them to beware of the sandbank and the rock. But of this friendly counsel no notice was taken, except that a large and famished dog, which sat on the prow, answered every shout with a long, loud, and melancholy howl. The deep sandbank of Carsthorne was expected to arrest the career of these desperate navigators, but they passed, with the celerity of waterfowl, over an obstruction which had wrecked many pretty ships. Old men shook their heads and departed, saying, "We have seen the fiend sailing in a bottomless ship. Let us go home and pray." But one young and wilful man said, "Fiend, I'll warrant it's no fiend, but just Janet Withershin's the witch, holding a carouse with some of their Cumberland comers, and much red wine will be spilt between them. I would gladly have a 2 full. I'll warrant it's none of your cold, sour slay water like a bottle of Ballyskrinky's port, but a right drop of my heart's blood stuff, that would waken a body out of their last linen. I wonder where the comers will anchor their craft." "And I'll vow," said another rustic, "the wine they quaff is none of your visionary drink, such as a drouthy body has dished out to his lips in a dream, nor is it shadowy and unsubstantial like the vessels they sail in, which are made out of a cockle shell or a cast-off slipper, or the paring of a seaman's right thumbnail. I once got a hansel out of a witch's quaff myself. Old Marion Mathers, a Dustyfoot, whom they tried to bury in the old kirkyard of Dunscore, but the comer raised as fast as they laid her down, and nowhere else would she lie but in the bonny green kirkyard of Keir, among good and responsible folk. So I'll vow that the wine of a witch's cup is as fell liqueur as ever did a kindly turn to a poor man's heart. And be they fiends or be they witches, if they have red wine austere, I'll risk it for a draught. Silence, ye sinners, said the minister's son of a neighbouring parish, who united in his own person his father's lack of devotion with his mother's love of liqueur. Whisht! Speak as if you had the fear of something holy before you. Let the vessels run their own way to destruction. Who can stay the eastern wind and the current of the Solway Sea? I can find your scripture warrant for that. So let them try their strength on Blahooley rocks, and their might on the broad quicksand. There's a surf running there would knock the ribs together of a galley built by the imps of the pit, and commanded by the Prince of Darkness. Bonnily and bravely they sail away there, but before the blast blows, they'll be wrecked, and red wine and strong brandy will be as rife as dyke water, and we'll drink the health of Bonnie Bell Blackness out of her left foot slipper. The speech of the young profligate was applauded by several of his companions, and away they flew to the bay of Blahooley, from whence they never returned. The two vessels were observed all at once to stop in the bosom of the bay, on the spot where their hulls now appear. The mirth and minstrelsy waxed louder than ever, and the forms of maidens, with instruments of music and wine-cups in their hands, thronged through the decks. A boat was lowered, and the same shadowy pilot who conducted the ships made it start towards the shore with the rapidity of lightning, and its head knocked against the bank, where the four young men stood who longed for the unblessed drink. They leaped in with a laugh, and with a laugh they were welcomed on deck. Wine-cups were given to each, and as they raised them to their lips the vessels melted away beneath their feet, and one loud shriek, mingled with laughter still louder, was heard over land and water for many miles. Nothing more was seen nor heard until the morning, when the crowd who came to the beach saw with fear and wonder the two haunted ships, such as they now seem, masts and tackle gone, nor mark nor sign by which their name, country, or destination could be known, was left remaining. Such is the tradition of the mariners, and its truth has been attested by many families whose sons and fathers have been drowned in the haunted bay of Blahooley.
So beware of the banks, because there may be ships there. They might not get back. Quite a ghostly story, you could say.
I mean, there's more to it as well. There's more to it than just that, but that is where I sort of decided to cut it off, because it did go on for a bit of a while after that. And there's all sorts of stuff really involved in it. And sightings of the ship. There's a widow who has another sighting of the ship. And there's a man called Adam Gaupin has something to do with them. And witches and elves as well. But a lot of it, I think what stopped me from reading it was, one, the length, and two, that it was, the rest of it is predominantly in Scots. Which, quite frankly, yeah, I get the classification of it as another language, because there were so many words in there that I didn't recognize and wouldn't have had the faintest clue how to pronounce.
Yeah. It can be a bit difficult at times. There are words I have to check up when it comes to pronunciation, and some stories have quite a few of those, so it can be a bit tedious. But you do want to have it as accurate as possible, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this sort of tale here think is probably a Danish loan or something, because they're talking about the ships being Scandinavian.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly a lot of Danish loan stories all around Scotland. I mean, we've gone into some of them before with, there were similar concepts to the holder and stuff, and there's a mixture, really, of things. There's giants as well. I think the one of the more Celtic rooted stories is the Mother of the Sea. And so therefore that an old woman has a tie to the haunted ships. That's not surprising, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Mother of the Sea is the old woman in control of the sea.
Yeah.
But yeah.
With the
I just liked it for the spooky, really.
yeah. It does remind me of the Norse goddess Ran. She is the goddess of the drowned, and those who perish at sea will dine in her watery halls. The word in contemporary Norwegian literally means robbery. So there is a slightly different interpretation of the word as well, but I don't quite remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
That happens sometimes.
Yeah. But it certainly has been spooky. And I do not think I want to go on a ship ever again after researching for this stream. I wasn't keen on them originally, but now I'm like, ships, no. Just no.
I've already been on them, so I don't really have that fear, even after...
I mean, I have already been on ships. I didn't really enjoy it, though. I enjoyed it sometimes, because when you're sailing through nice scenery and the water's fairly calm, that's all right. But then the amount of time that you have to spend looking at the horizon on the highest point of the ship, or down in the hold, being at the sort of lowest center of gravity to avoid constant motion sickness.
You suffer from that?
Yep.
Then it's not fun. I have an iron stomach, so I never get seasick. So I don't really have that problem. When it's a bit wavy, I can actually find it quite fun, in particular when trying to walk in a straight line, because it's literally impossible.
Honestly, anytime I've been on a ship, I've had to take like heavy duty antiemetics, balance things, like not fun. Not fun.
As far as I know, people who
most transport is pretty bad, but ships, yeah.
As far as I know, people who do get seasick, they very rarely enjoy being on ships. Ferocious Chihuahua is asking me if I have an iron stomach eating fish, though. No, I don't. That is one of the very few instances I don't. So, yeah. And he also donated a diamond during the story. Nice show, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is very good of you.
I'm sort of the opposite way. When it comes to food, I can eat anything. So I got an iron stomach in that respect. Like, it's been in the fridge for 4 days. probably fine. I think I've built up an immune system.
Yeah, I can pretty much eat anything, but I'm a very picky eater when it comes to taste and texture and stuff like that. So, but it does take very much to actually make me queasy. You know, like a bit too much tequila or moonshine and stuff like that.
Yes.
Done
We all
that.
know that makes you queasy.
Yeah, done that a few too many times, but those days are long gone. Thank the gods.
Well, overly much of mead, you shouldn't have it.
No,
Wise
definitely
words
not.
from the one-eyed god.
Yeah, I actually haven't tasted mead, but I do want to become a beekeeper.
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I do want to become a beekeeper and make my own mead. That would be nice.
Yeah, you can sort of get it, and I do and stuff, for libations and that to the ancestors and the gods, and it does basically just taste like honey.
Yeah,
Maybe kind of fruity as well.
I suppose we do have it in Norway, but alcohol in Norway, anything with that alcohol in it, is extremely expensive. So I don't want to waste my money on it. Not because the product might not be worth it, but I don't want to give that much money to the state.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yep. Taxing things instead of expecting people to exercise self-control.
Yeah, it came around during the abolition era. That was happening around the same time in the US. The fight for it started in the 1800s, and for Norway's case, it was mainly because we were very poor at the time, and quite a few men turned to alcohol to drown their sorrows. And then their wives and children didn't have the best, so much money to spend on, food and stuff. At least that's how it's portrayed these days. That might be quite skewed, so bear that in mind. But that was also part of the movement in the US was also due to overconsumption by men, which affected their families in somewhat of a bad way with the saloons and everything. So I think it's at least part of the reason. So alcohol wasn't banned completely in Norway, but they put a heavy tax on it. And our consumption differs a bit from quite a few other European countries. But I do think it's mainly just fueled the binge culture during the weekends.
Yep.
So
yeah, there's kind of like restrictions in certain parts of the UK on when you can and can't buy alcohol. Scotland kind of has them.
That's in Norway as well. Very, very strict. It's the sale of alcohol in the grocery store ends at 8 o'clock. We do have a wine monopoly for wine and spirits and everything above, basically really cider and beer.
Really speaking, this is discriminatory against pirates because they require rum at all times. It is their culture.
Yeah. The wine monopoly closes, I think it's 6 or something at the latest. And of course, earlier on Sundays, then I think it's 3 or 4. And in the grocery store, it closes at 6. And there's no way to get it unless you go to a restaurant or a bar or something on Sundays. So, yeah. Carlotta asked which region of Norway I'm located. I'm in the southeastern region. That's as close as I will reveal. Oh, yeah.
South Norway. Illuminatus identifies as a pirate.
Ah. Must be handy when it comes to rum drinking.
It is indeed. I thought Illuminatus identified as a triangle. Or a lizard person. Given the name.
I was about to say that he might identify as a single eye, and then I remembered your avatar is a single eye. Do. Sorry, couldn't help
Illuminati
myself.
confirmed. No, not in the Illuminati. I just liked this eye.
Yeah.
It's a good eye. Yeah. The Illuminati is a weird concept. I think it's just sort of a way of making the whole New World Order type elites are up to something thing look a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. There
Bit
is
of a psyop.
historical truth to it. I know Semiagog does a series with, I think it's an Austrian historian, or maybe he's German. I don't quite remember. Their last episode went into the French Revolution, which was really interesting. Definitely recommend that. But I think the episode before that, they went into the whole Illuminati thing. And that is on my to-watch list.
Oh, check it out.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly there have been occult societies knocking around, doing things for many centuries now. Whether they actually achieved anything actually occult, debatable, but they probably did a lot of unpleasant things in the process of trying.
That might be the case. Pirates are definitely an interesting topic, though, and as Jewel says, we're all pirates now. Just try typing an English, Welsh, or Scottish flag in the chat, which is quite a good point. Question, though.
Oh, YouTube won't allow that, will they?
Apparently not, but will they allow a Norwegian flag?
Norway flag, huh? Experiment. Which countries are acceptable?
Yeah, which countries exist?
All of them.
Oh.
All of them have the right to exist.
Yeah.
Well, they just do exist, regardless of a concept known as rights or not.
Yeah. Report back from Jewel says black flag, so I suppose Norway doesn't exist either. Well, it was good while it lasted.
Flags are banned.
Yeah.
No more flags.
No.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be a bit of a downer for all the football fans.
Indeed. What will they do?
Deal, I've let you do a British flag. Illuminatus claims that Australia isn't real. Sun Vessel, whom I think is possibly from there, says, oh, it is.
Well, it definitely seems to have gone back to its roots these days. Not going to specify any further. I think we all know the point. Oh,
Yes.
Norway exists. It's allowed. Yes, yay.
Great.
Yeah,
Black flags. Oh dear. Flag nonsense.
yeah.
Well,
So,
that's all we have time for tonight.
yeah.
Do let us know your country exists
Yeah,
according to the YouTube list of
yeah.
countries that exists. If you live in a country that exists, we congratulate you. If not, commiserations. You've evidently been preemptively wiped off the map.
Yeah. Illuminatus says that Norway is real but far away. No, it's not far away. It's right here.
I mean, it depends on where you're situated.
Yeah. Definitely not far from me, at least. But then I am in Norway, so what can you expect then?
All of the flags on D-Life. Many flags.
Yeah. So that was our ghostly ship stories for tonight. It does tend to be tragic and a bit scary stories when it comes to ghostly ships, but I suppose ghost ships denotes a bit of scary and tragic. Next week we have another interesting theme. And quite nautical as well. What was the title you had for that again? I will admit I forgot it.
I do believe that next week we are doing islands. We're doing Blessed. We're doing Lost Lands and Blessed Isles.
That was it.
Which should be a good one because, of course, there are many significant islands, especially in Brittonic and Celtic mythology for sure.
Indeed.
So, yes.
Well, there's always talks about strange land being situated somewhere, and when you try to find it, you can't find it. So, yeah, let's look forward to what we will find on Lost Lands and Blessed Isles. Until then, I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday, whatever is left of it, and a wonderful week, and see you next Sunday next week.
Yes, see you next week. Goodbye, good night.
Good night.